5-year-old human boy gives his blanket to freezing alien twins. What the aliens did next. The city of Naivas burned under twin moons. Its once magnificent spires now jagged teeth against the night sky. Aerial bombardments had transformed the proud Luridian capital into a maze of rubble and desperation. Through this apocalyptic landscape moved Enora Voss, her sky-blue skin dulled by ash and fear, white hair hanging in tangled ropes around her face. "Lady Voss, we must return to the shelter," urged Commander Krell, his massive frame dwarfing hers as he scanned the horizon with narrowed eyes. "The human forces are advancing from the south quadrant." "My children are out here somewhere," Enora replied, her melodic voice cracking. "I will not abandon them." The 4 Luridian guards exchanged uneasy glances. They had been searching for hours, combing through districts that grew increasingly dangerous as the human-Luridian conflict intensified. What had begun as a diplomatic misunderstanding 3 years ago had escalated into full-scale war, with Naivas becoming the latest battleground. "The council minister's orders were clear," said another guard, his hand resting on his pulse rifle. "Your safety is paramount, especially given your husband's position." Enora's large blue eyes flashed. "My husband is dead, Commander. Killed in the same bombing that separated me from my children." Her voice hardened. "I am no longer asking for your permission. Either assist me or leave me to search alone." The commander sighed, then nodded. "We'll continue for another hour, then we must return to the emergency bunker." They moved deeper into the ruined city, the guards' heavy boots crunching on broken glass and concrete. Enora's heart pounded with each passing minute. Her twins, barely 6 months old, had been with their nurse when the attack came. The nurse's body had been found in the rubble of their home, but the infants were missing. In a narrow alley 5 blocks away, Milo huddled against a crumbling wall, his small body shivering despite the warm night. At 5 years old, he had already mastered the art of survival on Navis's unforgiving streets. Orphaned when the first human settlers were executed as spies, he had learned to scavenge, hide, and move silently through the alien city. His dirty blonde hair hung in his eyes as he gnawed on a piece of synthetic protein he'd fished from a military dumpster. The fighting had intensified recently, forcing him to abandon his usual hiding spots. This new area was unfamiliar, but quieter than the sectors where human troops were advancing. A soft, warbling cry caught his attention. Milo froze, protein bar halfway to his mouth. The sound came again, not quite human, but unmistakably the cry of something young and distressed. Cautiously, he crept toward the source, alert for any trap. Behind a pile of debris, nestled in a shallow depression, lay 2 tiny Luridian infants. Their sky-blue skins seemed to glow in the darkness, marked with the characteristic pale patches of their species. Large blue eyes, glistening with tears, stared up at him. They were wrapped in a single thin blanket that did little to protect them from the night chill. Milo hesitated. Luridians were the enemy. Their kind had killed his parents, had driven humans into hiding or resistance. But these weren't soldiers. They were babies, probably no older than half a year, abandoned in the chaos of war. Without further thought, Milo shrugged off his prized possession, a rough brown cloak he'd scavenged from a dead refugee. It was too big for him, but it was warm and had kept him alive through countless cold nights. He gently wrapped it around the alien infants, tucking it securely around their tiny bodies. "It's okay," he whispered, though he doubted they understood. "I'll stay with you." The night grew colder as Milo sat beside the twins, occasionally adjusting his cloak to keep them covered. When they fussed, he hummed fragments of lullabies he barely remembered. Eventually, they drifted to sleep, their small hands clutching at the fabric of his gift. Milo didn't sleep. He kept watch, his young face set in determination beyond his years. These babies needed him, and for the first time in a long while, he felt needed. Dawn broke over Navis, painting the ruins in harsh orange light. The distant sound of engines grew closer, heavy rumbling machines approaching through the debris-strewn streets. Milo tensed, ready to flee, but the infants had begun to stir, their cries growing more insistent. Around the corner came 4 armored Luridian guards on hovercycles, flanking a slender female figure who dismounted before the vehicles had fully stopped. Her white hair streamed behind her as she ran toward the sound of the crying infants, guided by a mother's instinct that transcended the species. When she saw Milo sitting beside her children, Honora Voss stopped dead. The human boy, small, dirty, clearly half-starved, had not harmed her babies. Instead, he had wrapped them in his own cloak, had stayed with them through the night. Milo looked up at the Luridian woman, taking in her disheveled appearance and the naked hope in her eyes. Slowly he stood, gathering the bundled infants in his arms. He approached her cautiously, aware of the guards training the weapons on him. "I think these are yours," he said simply, holding out the precious bundle. Honora fell to her knees, taking her children with trembling hands. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched them to her chest, murmuring words of love in her native tongue. Milo stood awkwardly, suddenly aware of his ragged clothes and dirty face. After a moment's hesitation, he reached out and gently tucked a loose edge of his cloak more securely around one of the babies. "You can keep that," he said, his voice small but steady. "They need it more than me." The guards watched in stunned silence as the human child, a member of the species they had been taught to hate and fear, showed compassion that put their own prejudices to shame. Honora looked up, really seeing the boy for the first time. A human child alone in a war zone, giving away his only protection to comfort enemy infants. "What's your name?" she asked softly. "Milo," he answered, meeting her gaze with wary eyes. "Milo," she repeated, the alien name strange on her tongue. "Thank you for saving my children." He shrugged, uncomfortable with the gratitude. "It was cold last night." In that moment, looking at this small, brave human, Honora felt something shift inside her, a crumbling of certainties she had never questioned. This war, built on fear and misunderstanding, suddenly seemed absurd in the face of such simple kindness. "Where are your parents, Milo?" she asked gently. His eyes dropped to the ground, dead, when the fighting started. Honora's heart constricted. She looked at her twins, then back at the orphaned boy who had saved them. In his thin face, she saw the future, not just her children's, but that of both their peoples. "Would you like to come with us?" she asked, the words surprising even her. "You'll be safe. You'll have food and shelter." The guards shifted uneasily, but none dared object. They had witnessed something profound, something that challenged everything they thought they knew about humans. Milo hesitated, years of survival instinct warring with desperate loneliness. Finally, he nodded once, a barely perceptible movement. Honora smiled, her first genuine smile in days. "Then let's go home, Milo." As they mounted the hover cycles, the smallest guard lifted Milo onto his vehicle, handling the human child with unexpected gentleness. The boy clung to the guard's armor as they sped through the ruined city, away from the advancing front lines, toward an uncertain future that somehow held more hope than it had just hours before. The emergency shelter beneath the old Luridian Council building hummed with tense activity. Hundreds of displaced citizens huddled in the cavernous space, organized into family units, separated by makeshift privacy screens. Medical personnel moved among the injured, while distribution teams handed out rations with grim efficiency. When Honora entered with Milo and her twins, the buzz of conversation faltered, and then died. Every blue-skinned face turned toward them, expressions morphing from curiosity to shock to outrage as they registered the human child walking beside her. "Lady Voss," a stern voice called out. Counselor Dreth, his elaborate military uniform pristine despite the chaos, strode toward them. "What is the meaning of this?" Commander Krell stepped forward protectively. "The human boy saved the minister's children, Counselor." Dreth's eyes narrowed, the pale patches on his forehead darkening with displeasure. "And for this, you bring an enemy into our sanctuary?" "He's a child," Honora replied, her voice quiet but firm. "A child who showed more compassion than many adults I know." The counselor leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Your husband's body is barely cold, and you bring a human into our midst? Have you forgotten who killed him?" Honora's eyes flashed dangerously. "Extremists killed my husband, Counselor, not children." She placed a protective hand on Milo's shoulder. "This boy stays with me." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Milo pressed closer to Honora's side, his small face carefully blank, but his eyes darting nervously around the room. He had learned early that showing fear often invited cruelty. "The council will hear of this. Dreth warned, before turning on his heel and stalking away. An older Luridian woman approached, her face creased with concern. "Enora, my dear, your quarters are ready. Let me help with the little ones." "Thank you, Matron Leakey," Enora said gratefully. She handed one twin to the matron, keeping the other cradled against her chest. "This is Milo. He'll be staying with us." Matron Leakey's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded without comment. As they made their way through the shelter, Milo felt the weight of hundreds of alien stares, some curious, some hostile, a few, particularly from younger Luridians, almost kind. Their assigned quarters were small but private, a single room with a sleeping platform, a sanitation cubicle, and a small food preparation area. Matron Leakey helped settle the twins in a makeshift crib fashioned from storage containers and soft bedding. "The little ones need feeding," she observed, "and this young one needs a bath and fresh clothes." She gestured toward Milo, who stood awkwardly by the door. "I don't need," Milo began, but Enora interrupted gently. "Yes, you do. And food as well." She smiled at him. "It's all right to accept help sometimes, Milo." After Matron Leakey departed, promising to return with supplies, Enora sat on the edge of the sleeping platform, suddenly exhausted. The twins had fallen asleep, their tiny chests rising and falling in a perfect synchrony. "You can sit," she told Milo, patting the space beside her. He hesitated, then perched cautiously on the edge of the platform, maintaining a careful distance. "I'm sorry about the counselor," Enora said. "Not everyone thinks like him." Milo shrugged. "Oh, people don't like what they don't understand." Enora studied him with surprise. "That's a very grown-up observation. My dad used to say that." A shadow crossed his face. "Before the executions." Enora winced. The early days of the conflict had been marked by terrible mistakes on both sides. "I'm sorry about your parents, Milo." He nodded, his eyes fixed on the floor. "Your husband died too?" "Yes, in the bombing 3 days ago," Enora's voice caught. "He was a minister in the Luridian government. He was working on a peace proposal when he was killed." "Did humans kill him?" Milo asked bluntly. Enora hesitated. "The attack was claimed by a human extremist group. But I don't believe all humans are responsible, just as I hope you don't blame all Luridians for what happened to your family." Before Milo could respond, Matron Leakey returned with a young female assistant. They carried fresh clothing, food, and bathing supplies. "For the human child," the matron explained, setting down a bundle of clothing. "My grandson's things. He's a bit bigger, but we can adjust them." The younger female approached Milo with obvious curiosity. "I've never been this close to a human before," she admitted, her voice musical. "Your skin is so different." She reached out as if to touch his face, then caught herself. Milo stared back at her, equally fascinated by her sky blue complexion and the delicate patterns of lighter blue that swirled across her cheeks. "Talia is training as a medical apprentice," Matron Leakey explained. "She can help the boy bathe while you feed the twins." Enora glanced at Milo. "Would that be all right?" He nodded reluctantly. Survival on the streets had taught him that cleanliness was a luxury, but also that it was sometimes necessary to submit to the care of others to gain their trust. As Talia led Milo to the sanitation cubicle, Enora settled with her twins. She watched the human boy go, struck by his resilience and the quiet dignity with which he carried himself despite his circumstances. Later bathed and dressed in the adjusted Luridian clothing, Milo looked transformed. His blonde hair, clean for the first time in months, caught the light like pale gold. The Luridian garments, a simple tunic and leggings in soft gray, hung loosely on his thin frame, but Matron Leakey had skillfully pinned and folded them to fit. "Much better," Enora approved as they shared a simple meal of protein cubes and fruit paste. "Tomorrow we'll see about getting you proper human food." Milo looked up from his plate, which he had been devouring with careful restraint, despite his obvious hunger. "Why are you helping me?" Enora considered the question. "Because you helped my children when you had no reason to. Because you showed kindness when many would have shown indifference or cruelty." She paused. "And because I think my husband would have wanted me to." That night, as Milo slept curled at the foot of the platform, refusing the more comfortable spot Enora had offered, she watched over her strange new family. 2 Luridian infants and a human child, all orphaned in different ways by the same conflict. In the soft glow of the emergency lighting, Enora made a silent promise to her late husband. She would honor his memory by protecting this unexpected family they had formed, and perhaps in doing so, take a small step toward the peace he had died seeking. 3 days after Milo's arrival at the shelter, Enora was summoned to the council's temporary headquarters. She left the twins in Matron Leakey's care, and after a moment's hesitation, brought Milo with her. She didn't trust leaving him alone among Luridians who still viewed humans with suspicion. "Stay close," she murmured as they passed through crowded corridors. Milo nodded, his eyes alert, cataloging exits and potential threats with the instincts of a child who had survived on the streets. The makeshift council chamber was a converted storage room, its utilitarian walls now hung with the ceremonial banners of Luridian governance. 5 council members sat behind a long table, their formal robes incongruous against the industrial backdrop. At the center sat High Counselor Pax, his aged face lined with the wisdom of a century. "Lady Voss," he greeted, his deep voice resonating in the chamber. His eyes shifted to Milo. "And this must be the human child we've heard about?" Counselor Dreth, seated at the far end, made a dismissive sound. "This is highly irregular, bringing him here." "The boy stays with me," Enora said firmly. "That was our agreement." High Counselor Pax raised a placating hand. "No one is suggesting separation, Lady Voss. In fact, that's why we've called you here." He leaned forward. "Your story has traveled beyond these walls. A human child saving Luridian infants. It's captured imaginations on both sides." A female counselor with elaborate silver hair ornaments spoke up. "Ambassador Thorne from the Human Diplomatic Corps has requested a meeting. He believes your situation could serve as a foundation for renewed peace talks." Enora's heart quickened. "My husband would have wanted that." "Your husband was naive," Dreth snapped. "These humans cannot be trusted. They murdered him." "Extremists murdered him," Enora corrected, echoing her words to Milo. "Just as Luridian extremists have committed atrocities against humans." Milo shifted beside her, and Enora placed a protective hand on his shoulder. High Counselor Pax studied them thoughtfully. "The boy would need to appear at the talks. His presence would be symbolic." "Using a child as a political prop?" Enora frowned. "Using a child's act of compassion to remind both sides of our shared values," the female counselor countered. "The talks would be held in the neutral zone with full security protocols." Enora looked down at Milo. "What do you think? You don't have to do this." Milo considered for a moment, his young face serious. "Would it help stop the fighting?" "It might," Enora answered honestly. "Then I'll do it." The simple courage in his response silenced the room. Even Dreth seemed momentarily chastened. "Very well," High Counselor Pax nodded. "The meeting is scheduled for tomorrow. We'll send an escort." As they left the chamber, Enora felt a mixture of hope and apprehension. Peace had seemed impossible for so long, yet here was a small chance, born from the simplest act of kindness. They were halfway back to their quarters when Commander Krell intercepted them, his expression grave. "Lady Voss, a word in private?" His eyes flicked meaningfully toward Milo. "Anything you need to say can be said in front of Milo," Enora replied. Krell hesitated, then lowered his voice. "There's been chatter among the Purist faction. They're not happy about the peace talks or about..." He nodded toward Milo. The Purists were a radical, Luridian splinter group who believed in genetic superiority and opposed any cooperation with humans. They had gained influence as the war progressed, feeding on fear and hatred. "Have they made specific threats?" Enora asked, instinctively drawing Milo closer. "Nothing concrete, but I've doubled your security detail, and I'd advise staying in your quarters until the meeting." Enora nodded, thanking him for the warning. As they continued down the corridor, she noticed Milo watching her face. "Are you scared?" he asked with typical directness. "Cautious," she corrected with a small smile. "There's a difference." Back in their quarters, they found Talia playing with the twins. The young medical apprentice had taken a special interest in Milo, fascinated by human physiology and culture. She bombarded him with questions whenever they met, which Milo answered with increasing confidence. How do humans show affection? Talia asked as she helped Enora prepare the evening meal. Luridians touch foreheads and share breath. She demonstrated by leaning close to one of the twins, their foreheads touching as she exhaled gently. Humans hug, Milo explained, and sometimes kiss. His face scrunched in disgust at the latter. Kiss? Talia's head tilted curiously. It's when you press your lips together, Milo demonstrated by puckering his lips, making Talia laugh. That seems very intimate, she observed. Luridians only press lips during mating rituals. Enora cleared her throat, shooting Talia a warning look. The apprentice flushed a deeper blue, realizing she'd ventured into inappropriate territory. Sorry, she murmured, but her eyes still sparkled with curiosity. After dinner, as Milo helped to clear away the dishes, a task he insisted on, despite Enora's protests, Talia pulled her aside. There's something you should know, she whispered. I overheard Counselor Dreth speaking with someone in the medical bay. They mentioned the human boy in the peace talks and something about ensuring the right message is sent. Enora's blood chilled. Did they specify what that meant? Talia shook her head, but they seemed pleased. Too pleased. Later, after Talia had gone and Milo had fallen asleep, Enora paced their small quarters. The twins slumbered peacefully in their makeshift crib, unaware of the political machinations swirling around them. She studied Milo's sleeping form, curled tightly as if even in sleep he needed to protect himself. In just a few days, this human child had upended her world. His simple act of kindness had created a ripple effect that now threatened to become a tidal wave of change, or a dangerous backlash. A soft knock interrupted her thought. She opened the door cautiously to find Commander Krell. We've intercepted communications, he said without preamble. The purists are planning something during tomorrow's meeting. We don't have details, but we can't cancel. Enora finished his thought. This might be our only chance for peace. Krell nodded grimly. I'll have my best people there, but you should be prepared for trouble. After he left, Enora returned to her vigil. Tomorrow would either mark a new beginning or a tragic end. As she watched over her unlikely family, she made a silent vow. Whatever happened, she would protect Milo just as fiercely as she protected her own children. He had given everything he had to save her twins. She would do no less for him. Outside their quarters, unseen in the shadows, a figure watched the door with cold calculation. The human child had become a symbol, one that certain factions couldn't allow to flourish. By morning, plans would be set in motion that would ensure the proper order of things remained undisturbed. The neutral zone had once been Nevis's grand central plaza, a testament to Luridian architectural prowess with its soaring arches and luminescent stone. Now it stood as a stark reminder of what the war had cost, its beauty marred by barricades and weapon emplacements. Enora adjusted Milo's collar nervously as their transport approached the security checkpoint. The twins remained at the shelter with Matron Leaky. Bringing them had been deemed too risky. Remember, she told Milo softly, you don't have to say anything if you don't want to. Just being there is enough. Milo nodded solemnly. He wore a specially tailored outfit, a compromise between human and Luridian styles that symbolized the bridge they hoped to build today. His blonde hair had been neatly combed, though one stubborn lock still fell across his forehead. Commander Krell sat across from them, his posture rigid. My team has secured the perimeter, but stay alert. We still don't know what the purists are planning. The transport slowed as they reached the checkpoint. Through the window, Enora could see the human delegation arriving simultaneously on the opposite side of the plaza, a carefully choreographed show of equality. That's Ambassador Thorne, Krell pointed to a tall, distinguished man with silver-streaked dark hair, and beside him, Enora's attention shifted to the second human, younger with broad shoulders and a face that somehow managed to look both battle-hardened and kind. He wore a formal military uniform with commander's insignia, but moved with an easy grace that belied his martial appearance. Commander Daniel Foster, Krell supplied, Human Special Forces. He's been advocating for peace since the conflict began. Unusual for a military man. Something in Krell's tone made Enora glance at him. You respect him. We've faced each other in battle twice, Krell admitted. Both times he prioritized civilian evacuation over tactical advantage. He's honorable, The transport doors opened and they stepped into the tense atmosphere of the neutral zone. Security personnel from both species maintained a wary distance from each other, hands never far from weapons. Ambassador Thorne approached first, his diplomatic smile practiced but genuine. "Lady Voss, thank you for agreeing to this meeting." His eyes moved to Milo, softening. "And you must be the young man we've heard so much about." Milo stared up at the tall human with undisguised curiosity. It had been months since he'd seen another of his kind. Commander Foster stepped forward, dropping to one knee to meet Milo at eye level, a gesture that made the Luridian guards tense until they realized its purpose. "Hello there," he said, his voice warm and deep. "That was a brave thing you did." Milo shrugged, suddenly shy. "They were cold." Foster's smile crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Simple as that, huh?" He looked up at Enora, and something electric passed between them, recognition perhaps of kindred spirits caught in circumstances beyond their control. "Commander Foster has been instrumental in arranging this meeting," Ambassador Thorne explained as they walked toward the central pavilion. "He believes, as I do, that this conflict has gone on far too long." "My husband felt the same," Enora said quietly. Foster's expression grew solemn. Minister Voss was a voice of reason. His death was a tragedy for both our peoples. Inside the pavilion, representatives from both sides sat at a circular table, a deliberate choice to avoid any perception of hierarchy. High Counselor Pax and Counselor Dreth represented the Luridian leadership, while Ambassador Thorne and Commander Foster spoke for humanity. As the formal discussions began, Milo grew restless. Enora had anticipated this and quietly provided him with a small drawing device. He sketched absently while the adults talked, occasionally looking up when voices rose in disagreement. "The human incursions into Luridian territory," Dreth began heatedly, "were in response to Luridian attacks on civilian settlements," Foster countered, his calm tone a stark contrast to Dreth's agitation. "Gentlemen," Ambassador Thorne interjected, "we're here to find common ground, not rehash grievances." High Counselor Pax nodded. "Indeed. Perhaps we should focus on the example before us." He gestured toward Milo, a human child who showed compassion to Luridian infants. "If a child can see beyond our differences, surely we can as well." Milo looked up, suddenly aware he was the center of attention. His eyes met Commander Foster's, who gave him an encouraging nod. "I just did what anyone would do," Milo said, his small voice carrying in the sudden silence. They were babies. They needed help. The simple wisdom of his statement hung in the air, momentarily silencing even the most hardened negotiators. As the talks progressed, Enora noticed Commander Foster watching her when he thought she wasn't looking. There was something in his gaze that made her pulse quicken. Admiration, yes, but something more. Something that reminded her she was not just a mother and widow, but a woman. During a brief recess, Foster approached her as Milo was being shown a tactical display by a fascinated Luridian security officer. "He's an extraordinary kid," Foster observed, nodding toward Milo. "Yes," Enora agreed, "though I suspect his compassion isn't as unusual for humans as some of my people believe." Foster's smile was wry. "Just as not all Luridians are the cold, calculating beings of human propaganda." He hesitated, then added more quietly, "I've been following your work in refugee resettlement, even before this situation with Milo. You've saved many lives, human and Luridian." Enora felt a flush of pleasure at his recognition. "How did you know about that?" "Those operations were confidential. I make it my business to know who's working for peace," he replied, his eyes a warm brown that reminded her of the rare earth spices her people prized, held hers for a moment longer than necessary, especially when they're as dedicated as you. The moment was broken by a commotion at the entrance. A Luridian messenger hurried in, whispering urgently to Commander Krell, whose expression darkened. "We need to evacuate," Krell announced, moving swiftly to Enora's side. "Intelligence reports purist forces moving toward the neutral zone." Ambassador Thorne rose immediately. "We should postpone—" "No," Foster interrupted, his voice firm. "That's exactly what they want. We continue the talks, but we move them to a secure location." He turned to Enora. "The human embassy has a bunker designed to withstand orbital bombardment. We can continue there." Counselor Dreth's face contorted with outrage. You expect us to enter a human stronghold? This could be a trap. If Commander Foster wanted to trap us, High Counselor Pax observed mildly, he hardly needs such an elaborate ruse. Before Dreth could respond, the distant sound of explosions rocked the building. Milo ran to Enora's side, his eyes wide with fear. Foster moved with practiced efficiency, coordinating with Krell to secure their exit. As they hurried toward the transports, Enora found herself beside him. Milo clutched tightly to her side. Stay close, Foster told her, his hand briefly touching the small of her back, a gesture both protective and oddly intimate. I won't let anything happen to either of you. The sincerity in his voice made her believe him, despite everything the war had taught her about trust. As they boarded the transports, Luridians and humans, together in a hasty alliance of necessity, Enora caught sight of Counselor Dreth speaking urgently into a communication device, his expression triumphant rather than concern. Foster followed her gaze, his eyes narrowing. You noticed it too, he said quietly. He doesn't seem worried about the attack, Enora confirmed. Because he knew it was coming, Foster concluded grimly. The question is, who's he really working with? As their transport sped toward the human embassy, Enora found herself wondering the same thing. The pieces didn't fit unless someone wanted this war to continue, unless peace threatened something more valuable than the lives being lost. Beside her, Milo pressed closer, his small hand finding hers. In his eyes, she saw not fear, but determination, the same spirit that had led him to share his only possession with two alien infants on a cold night. Whatever conspiracy they faced, Enora realized, they would need that same simple courage to see it through. The human embassy bunker hummed with activity as security personnel established perimeters and communications arrays. Despite the crisis atmosphere, the space was surprisingly comfortable. Designed to house diplomats during extended emergencies with private quarters, meeting rooms, and even a small recreational area. Milo explored this new environment with cautious curiosity, while the adults conferred in the main strategy room. Foster had insisted that High Counselor Pax and Ambassador Thorn be given a secure channel to contact their respective governments, while Counselor Dreth was politely but firmly kept under observation. We have intelligence suggesting this conflict is being artificially prolonged, Foster explained, projecting a series of data points onto the holographic display. Supply routes that shouldn't exist, weapons shipments that don't match official inventories, communications that bypass normal channels. Enora studied the evidence, her analytical mind, honed by years of diplomatic work alongside her late husband, quickly grasping the implications. You think someone's profiting from this war? Not just profiting, Foster corrected, orchestrating it. The bombing that killed your husband occurred hours after he'd made a breakthrough in the peace negotiations. High Counselor Pax's aged face grew grave. Minister Voss had discovered irregularities in military procurement. He believed someone was diverting resources. Counselor Dreth oversees military procurement, Enora said slowly. Ambassador Thorn nodded. We've had similar suspicions on our side. Hardliners who seem to know exactly when and where to strike to maximize casualties and minimize chances for dialogue. While the adults talked, Milo had wandered to the far side of the bunker where storage units lined the walls. Something about the patterns of security panels caught his attention. One didn't quite match the others. With a child's natural curiosity, he pressed his palm against it. To his surprise, the panel slid open, revealing a small alcove containing what looked like communication equipment. Fascinated, Milo crawled inside. The device was unlike anything he'd seen before. Neither human nor Luridian in design. Its surface pulsed with an eerie violet light. When Milo accidentally brushed against it, the device activated, projecting a three-dimensional image into the air. Milo stared at the strange figures in the projection. Tall, spindly beings with elongated heads and multiple eyes. They spoke in a harsh, clicking language he couldn't understand, but one word repeated frequently. Navies. Commander Foster, Milo called, backing away from the strange device. I found something weird. Foster reached Milo first, with Enora close behind. His expression shifted from curiosity to shock as he recognized the projection. Proxians, he breathed, but they're supposed to be neutral in this conflict. "What are proxians?" Milo asked, pressing closer to Enora's side. "A species from the Outer Rim," Foster explained, already examining the device. "Technologically advanced but isolationist. They've maintained diplomatic relations with both humans and Luridians while staying out of our disagreements." "Apparently not as neutral as they claimed," Enora observed grimly. Foster activated his communication implant. "Security team to storage section C, and find Counselor Dreth now." But Dreth had already slipped away during the confusion, taking a transport back toward Luridian territory. "He's running to his real masters," Foster said as they regrouped in the strategy room. "This device is a direct link to Proxian High Command. They've been playing both sides, selling weapons, feeding intelligence, creating incidents when peace seemed too close." "But why?" Ambassador Thorne demanded. High Counselor Pack's voice was heavy with realization. "Navis sits on the largest deposit of stellarite in this sector, essential for their propulsion technology. If humans and Luridians were at peace, we'd control those resources together. At war, we're too distracted to notice them being gradually depleted." "We need proof that will convince both governments," Enora said. "This device alone won't be enough." Foster nodded. "The Proxians must have agents embedded in both human and Luridian command structures. Dreth is clearly one, but there will be others." As the implications sank in, Enora felt a wave of grief. Her husband had died not for ideology or even misunderstanding, but for profit, sacrificed by those who saw war as a business opportunity. Foster seemed to sense her thoughts. "We'll finish what your husband started," he promised quietly. While the others worked to secure the evidence and establish secure communications, Foster led Enora to a small observation deck overlooking the embassy grounds. Through reinforced windows, they could see the city of Navis spread before them, fires still burning in some districts. "All this suffering," Enora whispered, "for resources." "It's an old story," Foster replied, his shoulder brushing against hers. "But it doesn't have to end the same way. Not this time." The proximity between them suddenly seemed charged with something beyond the crisis they faced. Enora became acutely aware of him as a man, his warmth, his scent, the steady rhythm of his breathing. "How did you know?" she asked, partly to distract herself from these unexpected feelings. "About the Proxians?" "I didn't. Not specifically." His gaze remained on the cityscape. "But I've seen too many conflicts that benefited neither side. Someone always profits from war. I just needed to figure out who." He turned to her then, his eyes reflecting the distant fires. "Your husband was a good man." He saw the same patterns. "Yes," Enora agreed softly. "He believed peace was possible." "He was right." Foster's hand found hers, his touch sending an electric current through her body. "And now we have a chance to prove it." The moment stretched between them, taut with possibility. Then Foster leaned forward, hesitated briefly, and pressed his lips to hers. The sensation was alien to Enora. Luridians didn't kiss, yet somehow felt perfectly natural. Her body responded with a rush of heat that left her dizzy. When they finally separated, both were breathing harder. "I'm sorry," Foster began. "I shouldn't have—" Enora silenced him by initiating another kiss. This one deeper, more certain. Her hands found the solid planes of his chest, while his arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer. "Don't apologize," she whispered against his mouth. "Not for this." Later, in the privacy of quarters assigned to her, they came together with an urgency born of shared danger and unexpected connection. The differences between their species, her cool blue skin against his warm tan, the patterns of light that rippled across her body when touched, became points of fascination rather than division. Their coupling was both tender and fierce, a defiance against those who would keep their peoples apart. In Foster's arms, Enora found not just pleasure, but a kind of healing, a reminder that life persisted even in war's shadow. Afterward, as they lay entwined, Foster traced the luminescent patterns on her shoulder. "We should check on Milo," he murmured. The mention of the boy brought reality rushing back. "Yeah," Enora agreed, reluctantly disentangling herself. "He's probably wondering where we are." They found Milo in the recreation area, teaching a fascinated human security officer the Luridian game Enora had shown him at the shelter. The boy looked up as they entered, his observant eyes taking in their slightly disheveled appearance and the new ease between them. "Are you going to be my new dad?" he asked Foster with characteristic directness. Foster blinked in surprise, then crouched to Milo's level. "That's something we'd all need to talk about. But I'd like to be your friend, if that's okay." Milo considered this seriously. Friends is good. For now. The adults exchanged amused glances over his head, but the moment of lightness was interrupted by an urgent call from the strategy room. "We've decoded more of the Proxian communications," Ambassador Thorne informed them. "They're planning something big, a false flag attack on both human and Luridian leadership. If it succeeds, the war could escalate beyond any hope of peace." "When?" Foster demanded. "Tomorrow. The Proxian agents are already in position." Enora's heart sank. They had the truth, but perhaps not the time to make it matter. Foster's expression hardened with determination. "Then we move tonight. We take what we've found directly to both governments simultaneously." "That's extremely risky," Thorne cautioned. "So is waiting," Foster countered. He looked at Enora. "Are you with me?" She nodded without hesitation. "Always." As they prepared for what might be their most dangerous mission yet, Enora found herself drawing strength from the unlikely family they had formed. A human commander, a Luridian diplomat, and a 5-year-old boy whose simple act of kindness had set everything in motion. Whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. Dawn broke over navies as 3 unmarked transports sped through the war-torn streets. In the lead vehicle, Enora sat beside Foster, her hand clasped tightly in his. Milo dozed against her other side, exhausted from the night's preparations. "Are you sure about this?" Foster asked, his voice low to avoid waking the boy. Enora nodded. "If we're to have any chance of being believed, we need to present our case together, human and Luridian, side by side." The joint emergency session had been arranged through High Counselor Pax's personal channels, bypassing the compromised official communications. Both human and Luridian leadership would gather at the neutral Cathedral of Concord, a structure that had somehow survived the bombings, perhaps as a final ironic monument to what had been lost. "We'll have 10 minutes at most before security protocols force them to separate," Ambassador Thorne warned from the seat ahead. "Make them count." Enora glanced down at Milo, who had insisted on coming despite their concerns. "I found the alien machine," he'd argued with the stubborn logic of a child, "and I'm part of the story." He wasn't wrong. The evidence they carried, the Proxian communication device, the decoded transmissions, the financial records showing resource extraction, was compelling. But Milo himself was the living embodiment of what could be human and Luridian, not just coexisting, but caring for one another. The transports slowed as they approached the cathedral. Through the tinted windows, Enora could see the heavy security presence. Human soldiers and Luridian guards maintaining a tense distance from each other, fingers never far from triggers. "Remember what Foster told the team? We move together. No separation. Any sign of Proxian interference, we abort and move to contingency plan." The contingency plan, a direct broadcast to the civilian population, was riskier but might be their only option if leadership proved unwilling to listen. As they exited the vehicles, Enora felt exposed, vulnerable. She drew Milo closer to her side while Foster scanned the perimeter, his military training evident in every movement. "Stay between us," he told Milo, who nodded solemnly. The cathedral's interior was a stark contrast to the devastation outside. Soaring ceilings of polished stone, intricate mosaics depicting the first contact between humans and Luridians centuries ago. A time of hope, not hatred. In the central chamber, 2 semicircles of officials faced each other across a divide, human military commanders and political leaders on one side, their Luridian counterparts on the other. The tension in the room was palpable, a living thing that seemed to pulse with each breath. High Counselor Pax and Ambassador Thorne moved forward first, their positions giving them the authority to open the proceedings. Commander Krell stood among the Luridian military contingent, his expression carefully neutral but his eyes watchful. "Honored representatives," Pax began, his aged voice carrying surprising strength, We have called this emergency session to present evidence of critical importance to both our peoples. Evidence that suggests we have been fighting the wrong enemy, Thorne continued seamlessly, that our conflict has been engineered by an outside force for their own gain. Murmurs rippled through both delegations. Honora spotted several officials exchanging wary glances, potential Proxian agents already planning their counter-arguments. Foster stepped forward, Honora and Milo beside him. 3 days ago, this human child discovered a Proxian communication device hidden in the human embassy bunker, a device that should not have existed. Honora took up the narrative. The transmissions we decoded reveal a systematic campaign by the Proxian hegemony to prolong and intensify our conflict while they extract stellarite deposits from beneath Nevis. A human general leaned forward. These are serious accusations. Where is this device now? Here, Foster replied, nodding to a security officer who brought forward a sealed container, along with complete records of the decoded transmissions. As the evidence was presented, Honora watched the faces of those assembled. Some showed shock, others skepticism, a very few showed fear. Those, she noted carefully, those were the ones to watch. A Luridian minister rose. Even if this is true, the damage is done. The trust between our peoples is broken beyond repair. Is it? Foster challenged. He gestured to Milo. This boy didn't think so when he found 2 Luridian infants alone in the cold. He gave them the only thing he had, his blanket, and stayed with them through the night. Milo stepped forward, his small face serious but unafraid, as he addressed the most powerful figures of 2 civilizations. They were just babies, he said simply. They needed help. It doesn't matter if they're blue or not. The profound wisdom in his childish statement hung in the air, momentarily silencing even the most hardened skeptics. Honora continued. My husband discovered the first thread of this conspiracy before he was killed. Minister Voss believed peace was possible, necessary for both our peoples to thrive. His work led to this moment. And to this, Foster added, activating a holographic display that showed resource extraction data, stellarite depletion patterns that coincide exactly with escalations in our conflict. Each time peace seemed possible, a new incident occurred. Each incident benefited neither humans nor Luridians, only the Proxians. The evidence was damning, but Honora could see resistance in some faces. Too much had been invested in hatred to abandon it easily. Then unexpectedly, Commander Krell stepped forward from the Luridian delegation. I have fought humans for 3 years, he said, his deep voice resonating in the chamber. I believed I was defending my people. But I have seen a human child protect Luridian infants at cost to himself. I have seen a human commander prioritize civilian lives over military advantage. He nodded toward Foster. If we have been manipulated, then our true strength lies in standing together against those who would use us as pawns. A ripple of agreement passed through the gathering, but before it could build, the cathedral doors burst open. A squad of mixed Luridian and human soldiers entered, led by a figure Honora recognized with a chill, Counselor Dreth. This is treason, Dreth announced. These individuals have conspired with enemy forces and fabricated evidence to undermine our war effort. Foster moved protectively in front of Honora and Milo. Your master sent you to silence us, Dreth? Or should I call you by your Proxian designation? Dreth's face contorted with rage. Seize them! But the soldiers hesitated, looking uncertainly between Dreth and their respective leaders. In that moment of hesitation, Milo darted forward, slipping past Foster's protective stance. He stopped directly between the 2 delegations, small and vulnerable in the vast chamber. Why are you still fighting? He demanded, his child's voice somehow cutting through the tension. The bad aliens are taking your special rocks while you hurt each other. That's stupid. A startled laugh escaped someone in the human delegation, quickly stifled, but it broke the spell of Dreth's command. High Counselor Pax rose to his feet. The boy speaks truth. We have been blind. He turned to the human delegation. I propose an immediate joint operation to verify these claims and, if proven, to confront the Proxian deception together. The human president nodded slowly. Agreed. And a temporary cessation of hostilities while we investigate. No! Dreth shouted, reaching for a concealed weapon. Foster moved with lightning speed, tackling him to the ground before he could fire. The soldiers who had accompanied Dreth now turned their weapons on him, their true loyalties revealed. "Take him to secure holding," the president ordered, "and identify any others who may be compromised." As Dreth was led away, raging against human sympathizers and race traitors, Enora felt a weight lift from her shoulders. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was the beginning of a path toward peace. Later, as joint human-Luridian teams began the process of identifying and neutralizing Proxian influence, Enora found Foster in a quiet corner of the cathedral gardens. Milo was nearby, fascinated by a fountain where water danced in patterns controlled by thought. "He's extraordinary," Foster said, watching the boy with obvious affection. "Yes," Enora agreed. "He reminded everyone of something simple we'd forgotten, that compassion transcends species." Foster turned to her, his eyes warm with an emotion that made her heart race. "What happens now? For us, I mean." Enora smiled, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw. "Now we build something new. Together." He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm in that strange, wonderful human gesture that sent shivers through her body. "I'd like that, very much." Their lips met in a kiss that held promise rather than desperate passion. The promise of time, of discovery, of a future neither had dared imagine days before. "You kissing?" Milo commented, having abandoned the fountain to find them. But his disgusted expression couldn't hide the pleased look in his eyes. Foster laughed, ruffling the boy's hair. "You'll understand someday." "No, I won't," Milo insisted with the certainty only a 5-year-old could muster. "Can we go get the twins now? I want to show them the fountain." Enora's heart swelled with love for this unexpected family they had formed: a human man, a Luridian woman, a human boy, and Luridian twins. Different species bound together by something stronger than biology. "Yes," she said, taking Milo's hand in hers while Foster took the other. "Let's go get our family." 6 months later, as Navis began the slow process of rebuilding, a small ceremony took place in the restored Central Plaza. A monument was unveiled, a simple sculpture of a small human boy offering a blanket to 2 Luridian infants. Beneath it, an inscription in both human and Luridian script: "From the smallest act of kindness, peace was born." Enora stood beside Foster, now her husband under both human and Luridian law, watching as Milo, officially their son, played with the twins, teaching them a game he'd invented that combined elements of both cultures. The Proxian threat had been neutralized, their manipulation exposed across the galaxy. The Stellarite resources of Navis were now jointly managed by a human Luridian commission, the Prophet's funding reconstruction efforts. It wasn't perfect. Centuries of mistrust couldn't be erased overnight. But each day brought new understanding, new connections between peoples who had once seen only enemies in each other. "Was it worth it?" Foster asked quietly, his arm around her waist. "All the pain, the loss to get here?" Enora watched Milo laugh as one of the twins attempted to mimic his movements, her blue skin contrasting with his human coloring. "Ask me again in 20 years, she replied, "when these children have grown up knowing only peace between our peoples." Foster smiled, pulling her closer. "I intend to." And in that moment, watching their unlikely family thrive against all odds, Enora knew with certainty that the simple act of a boy sharing his blanket had changed not just her world, but worlds beyond counting.